So we are talking about quality control arrangements at the overall firm level. And we said that the objective of the firm that is set out in ISQC 1 mirrors that of the auditor in ISA 220. The objective of the firm is to establish and maintain a system of quality control. You know, it's quite similar to what we are saying in ISA 220. But here, it takes a different, the outlook is quite different because here we are looking at the entire firm. So we need to ensure that the firm and its personnel comply with the professional standards and any legal and regulatory requirements, you know, and also reports issued by the firm are appropriate. So it's quite similar to what we are talking about here. I just wanted to show this to you. Yeah, it's quite similar, you know, very, very similar too. The quality control procedures that are applied within an audit firm will reflect the nature and the size of the audit practice. So these are the factors that influence the kind of procedures. It depends on the nature of the firm and the size of the audit practice. You know, however, personnel within the firm who are responsible for establishing and maintaining quality control procedures must have an understanding of the entire text of ISCQ 1. So this is where training comes in, right? The personnel within, for those who work in audit here, you realize that you have constant quality trainings because you want to make your employees or your personnel aware of the quality control procedures. Aware of the quality control procedures. You know, so that's something to keep in mind. You know, that's something to be aware of. You need to train your people to come to terms with quality. They don't automatically produce quality work. You need to train the people. As the firm must meet the requirements of ISQC 1, it should have a system in place which addresses each of the following elements. So these are 7 elements that are very, very important. If you can chew them, I'll say chew. But as always, what I do is I use acronyms. I use acronyms. So the acronym I use is HEAL MED. HEAL MED. HEAL and MED. MED is the short for medical doctor. So a medical doctor heals. HEAL MED. So I start with human resources, which is H. Ethical requirements, which is E. A, which is acceptance and continuance of engagement. L, which is leadership responsibilities. M, which is monitoring. E, which is engagement performance, and D, which is documentation. So that's how I remember it. So these are 7 key elements. 7 key elements which must be addressed when it comes to looking at the quality control arrangements at the entity level or at the overall firm level. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So everything is clear. Wow. Okay. Now let's look at leadership responsibilities for quality. for quality. So, when we talk about quality, leadership must own it. Leadership must own it. There must be a culture that must drive quality. There must be a culture that must drive quality. And that's what leadership responsibilities for quality is talking about. We already said that the engagement partner has, when it comes to critical issues surrounding quality, the engagement partner is responsible. So ISQC1 requires the firm to establish policies and procedures that are designed to promote an internal culture, very key word, for personnel or for employees to produce good quality audit work. There must be an internal culture that promotes quality. The culture must promote quality. The culture must promote quality. The culture should not condone with substandard work. That's basically what you are saying. Should not condone with substandard work. So that's very important, right? That's very important. You do not want, that's why sometimes when you go to the public institutions, there's no culture of quality. Anybody can do anything for it's fine. But in an audit environment, the internal culture must promote quality. Ultimate responsibility for quality control policies and procedures should rest with the firm's CEO or managing board of partners. Again, you see, when we talk about quality, it's from the top. It starts with the top. It starts with the top. It starts with the top, So I just want, if anyone can give an example of in their own organization, what do you think your organization has put in place to ensure a culture of quality, not just the audit environment? Can anyone please give just an example? Oh, any examples? Hey, are the people, is everyone there or everyone's just quiet on me?
So we are here.
Yeah, I'm asking a question. I'm saying that in your own organization, what are some of the things that you think they've put in place to ensure a culture of quality? Very simple question. Hey.
I'm trying to.
Hello, sir.
Somebody said, I don't know.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I'm not in any organization, but there's something the university we do as teacher evaluation something. So based on the courses you offer each semester or each year, you would evaluate the lecturer, how he did, and suggest way of making the class interesting on all those stuff. So I think that one will be an example of quality improvements or quality in an organization. Hello.
Yes. That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one, actually.
Okay. Sir.
Yes.
I think it's giving me a clue now. So in my organization too, what we have is we have media reviews and then annual staff performance review. So at this review, we have your line manager who will sit with you and then go through your work. So we have mid-year up to June, January to June, and then we have the annual PDR. So we do this on regular basis as a means of checking against the work that we've done for a particular period. And also there are certain KPIs which you have to meet, certain standards. So that is also reviewed as well. I think that comes into this anyway.
Yes. So those are the things I was just looking for, right?
Okay.
Those are the things I was looking for. I just wanted to understand whether you understand a culture of quality. A culture of quality would promote, understands approvals, understands reviews, understands leadership involvement. Those are the things I just wanted to hear, so that I just wanted to know if you guys were actually understanding, because it's easy to just go through this without you understanding. Okay. Then let's move on to ethical requirements. ISQ C1 requires, so we've talked about leadership responsibilities. Now let's talk about ethical requirements. We are following the 7 elements. ISQ C1 requires the firm to establish policies and procedures to provide it with reasonable assurance that the firm and its staff comply with ethical requirements and maintain independence. If you are reading through your audit book, you realize that independence and ethics go hand in hand. The issue of independence is an ethical issue, right? It's an ethical issue. Otherwise, what else, right? It borders on ethics. If someone is not independent, they will not be able to provide an objective opinion, and that is going to impact the opinion they give on the financial statement. So anytime you see relevant ethical requirements, you should see independence lurking around. The firm should communicate its independence requirement to staff. The firm should make the staff aware. What is all this independence about? Because if you are working in another industry, all these things, they are not necessary. If you are working, until you come into audit, that you realize that, I have to be independent, I have to be doing this, I have to be doing that. So communicates its independence requirements to staff. That's what the firm must do. The firm must also identify and evaluate circumstances and relationships that create threats to independence. So anything that poses a threat to independence, the firm must evaluate it. The firm must ensure that it is assessed. What's the purpose of that? To be able to mitigate it, to be able to apply the appropriate safeguards to mitigate it. If applying appropriate safeguards still doesn't work, then they probably have to withdraw from the engagement if that's appropriate. We talked about threats and safeguards a couple of weeks ago, I think. So you can always go and check that lecture. The policies and procedures should include requiring staff to notify the firm of circumstances and relationships that might create a threat to independence. So this is one policy as well, right? So if a staff, I'm working for an audit firm and I realize that, there's a threat to my independence, I should be able to notify the firm. I should be able to notify the firm. All these things promote a culture of quality. The staff should also be able to notify the firm if there are any breaches to independence. If there are any breaches to independence of which they become aware, they need to notify the firm real quick. They need to notify the firm. The firm must also communicate such breaches to the engagement partner, and other relevant staff as well. And the engagement partner will then advise on the action to be taken. When there's an independence issue, the engagement partner will advise. So these are some of the things that we need to know when it comes to ethics or ethical requirements. Like I said from the beginning, you can't talk about ethical requirements without talking about independence. The whole idea of independence borders on ethics, borders on ethics. So borders on ethics. So that's very, very key. That's very, very key. Okay, then let's move on to acceptance and continuance of engagement, which is the next step. ISQC 1 requires the firm to establish policies and procedures to provide it with reasonable assurance that the firm will only take on or continue on work where the firm is competent to perform the engagements. These are things we've talked about, right? The firm must be competent. If the firm is not competent, they can't handle the engagements. They must have the resources to do so, or to have to perform the engagements. They must comply with the relevant ethical requirements. They should also consider the integrity of the client. This client, is he a fraudster, or this client is actually a legit client? They must consider the integrity of the client. The policies and procedures should include requiring the firm to obtain sufficient information. You need to obtain information about the client to make a decision about them. So when you get a client, you need to research the client. That's why audit firms do what we call client research. They research the clients, try to understand the clients, what this client is all about, what they are trying to achieve. So you need to obtain sufficient information to make such decisions. And you need to consider potential conflicts of interest. This we've talked about in prior lectures, right? So if there are any potential conflicts of interest, that's also a huge consideration that the audit firm needs to make. And as well, you need to document all identified issues. All identified issues must be documented. So before an audit firm accepts an engagement or continues an engagement, there are certain things that must be in place, right? The auditor must assess their own competence. Are they competent enough to carry out this engagement? That's one. Do they have the resources, the people that will be able to handle this engagement? Do they have them? Do they have them? And also, is this client a legit client? We need to consider the integrity of the client before we even move on to work with them. So these are some of the considerations that we make. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so let me ask a question. I know there are some people who are doing audits here, right? But when we say, I know there are some people who are doing audits here, but can anyone, if anyone is willing to share, can anyone share what kind of independence training, what are some of the highlights of the independence training that they go through before undertaking audit work? What are some of the things they train you about or they train you on before you undertake audit work?
Okay, Esther, so with where I work, we have a course that we normally do for new joiners.
Mm-hmm.
So if you join as a new joiner or as a new employee of the firm, you are mandated to take a compulsory independence training. So the training is all about understanding one, the independence you are to exhibit at the client level. So you are assessed on your financial interest in the client, if you have any financial interest. They also look at if probably a close relative or an immediate relative is an employee of that client, with that client, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
They also assess if probably the relatives also have any financial interest in with that client.
Mm-hmm.
If, let's say, for example, you have a mutual fund, you are asked to inquire from your fund manager where they are going to invest your funds in, so that in case you are auditing a client where your money is being invested in, you have to declare independence at that stage. Yeah, I think that's the short something.
Okay, that's very, very good, actually. That's very, very good. So that's a very, very good one. I just wanted people to have an idea of what this whole independence thing is about. So let's move on to the next one, which is human resources. Please, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You know, when people are not asking questions, I just wonder if they understand or is this that they can't talk. Okay. So ISQC 1 requires the firm to ensure that it has the sufficient personnel. So human resource, we are talking about, do you have the numbers? Do you have the resources to be able to, you know, meet your overall quality control objectives, to perform your audit to the standard that we needed to? Very, very key. Very, very key. So ISQC 1 requires the firm to ensure it has sufficient personnel with the competence, capabilities, and commitment to ethical principles to meet its overall quality control objectives. Very, very, very important. Very, very important. You know, so here we are looking at the people. And so what kind of policies should exist? The policies that should exist should be we should be looking into recruitment, training, and development of staff. So when we are recruiting people, like our brother said, when we are recruiting people, you know, when we are recruiting people, we should train them, you know, we should know the kind of people we are recruiting. That's why for some companies, right? When they are recruiting people, they'll tell you within 2 years, you must finish your ICA, because they are trying to get people who are technically skilled, Very, very important. Very, very important. Very, very important. So that's one. Policies should therefore exist for the recruitment, training, and development of staff. The firm should ensure compliance with the international standards of audit, and the audit staff should have a good knowledge of accounting standards. The firm's technical audit procedure should be set out in a manual and reinforced by training, you know. So that's why training, when it comes to human resources, that's one key thing. Okay, then let's move on to engagement performance. Slowly but surely, we are getting there. Engagement performance. Policies and procedures are required to include promoting consistent quality engagement performance, right? So we need to make sure that, you know, the work that is done, you know, is quality. And we cannot do that without ensuring appropriate supervision. So supervision responsibilities should be set out properly. Review responsibilities. You see, review comes here again. On the basis that more experienced team members review the work of less experienced team members. So that's usually what happens in audit environments. You have managers reviewing the work of associates. Very, very important. Then the last but one point, it says procedures for dealing with any differences of opinion between the engagement team and those consulted, or between the engagement partner and the engagement quality control reviewer. Okay, so in audits, after the engagement partner, there will be the engagement partner would have reviewed the work. There will be an opinion in mind. Sometimes there will be a difference in opinion. It's possible that there will be a difference in opinion between the partner and the control reviewer. The engagement control reviewer would be someone who is not on the engagement team. Someone who is not on the engagement team, who comes in to just review. It's like WAEC. I'm trying to find a good example. It's like somebody coming to review the work of another person, basically another top person in the company coming to review the work of the engagement partner. He's a quality control reviewer, so he ensures that the work that is done is appropriate. If there are any differences between those two people, right, there must be procedures for dealing with that. There must be procedures for dealing with that. That's very crucial. Very crucial. Very crucial. Very, very important. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something to keep in mind. Then procedures in respect of completion of the final audit files on a timely basis. So we also need to ensure that as part of engagement performance, timeliness is also key. So we need to ensure that the final audit files are completed in a timely manner. They are put, everything is kept confidential, and it's in safe custody, basically. It's in safe custody. Any questions so far? Today, no one is asking me questions. It's making me nervous. No one is asking me questions. Okay. Anyway, let me move on. So let's look at monitoring of quality control procedures. The firm is required to establish a monitoring process, right? We need to monitor quality. The fact that leadership is all for quality and all that doesn't mean it will just happen automatically. We need to monitor quality, to ensure that the quality control system is relevant, is adequate, and is operating effectively. It's operating effectively. So that's very, very key. And that's very, very key. This process should include inspecting, inspecting. This process should include inspecting at least one completed engagement for each engagement partner, So on a cyclical basis, we should be checking. The firm should evaluate the effects of any deficiencies found to determine if they do indicate a failing in the firm's quality control system. So as part of the monitoring process, we need to evaluate the effect of any deficiencies. If we encounter any deficiencies, what is the impact? Then we need to communicate such deficiencies to relevant personnel and take remedial action. You know, the remedial action we will take could be several things. You know, could be several things. A typical example that we could use that I agree with very, very much is communication of the findings to those responsible for training and professional development, right? When we see a deficiency, you know, one of the people we need to talk to is the training and professional development people, you know, so that they can tweak their training, you know. As we get insights like this, you know, we need to tweak their training. So the kind of training that they give to employees should, you know, consider some of any deficiencies that they might have encountered. Because if it's happened now, it means that it can happen in the future. Also, things like disciplinary action and all that. All these things are things that could also serve as remedial actions. Then let's talk about documentation. Documentation. Very, very important. Documentation. So what is documentation all about? The following matters are required to be documented. We need evidence of the operation of each element of the system of quality control. We need evidence of that each element of the system of quality control is operating effectively. So the elements that we've talked about, we need evidence that is operating wonderfully. If there are any complaints that are made against the firm, we need to provide some evidence on it as well and how they were resolved. That is, if they were resolved. So we need to document quality control procedures. Very, very key. Any questions on the elements so far? Any questions on the elements?
No, please.
Okay. So we looked at.
Sir, please, one minute.
Okay.
So these quality control arrangements, they must all, do they all have to occur concurrently, or like at the same time, or they can start from one point or move to the other and to the other? So that's my main question.
No, they don't have to all be concurrent. But they all have to happen. Like, it's not even something, it's not like, what's the word? It's not like, you don't have to, these things like they are kind of like mutually exclusive. Is that the word? No. They work hand in hand. Right? They work hand in hand. So if you look at this very, very carefully, right? It's not like you can work on one and leave the other. Right? So you can't work on leadership responsibilities for quality and not work on human resources. You know? So they go hand in hand. They work together. They work together. It's not like the firm sits down and says, today we are going to work on leadership responsibilities for quality. Then next month we are working on ethical requirements. They all go hand in hand. I don't know if I answered the question. Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Quality control procedures. Quality control procedures specific to individual engagement. Specific to individual engagement. Specific to individual engagement. The quality control procedures applied to the conduct of each individual audit engagement will be based around the effective management of the audit team working on that engagement. So this will involve things like the assignment of engagement teams, the direction and supervision of staff, and the review of their work. So let's start with the assignment of engagement teams. The engagement partner is responsible for ensuring that the engagement partner, is responsible for ensuring that the engagement team assigned has the capability and competence to perform the engagement. So like we've always said, the engagement partner has to make sure that, the people in the team have the responsibilities. The people in the team, have the necessary competence, and the necessary, capabilities to perform the audit in line with the professional, regulatory, and legal standards. We need to make sure of that. So that's one thing. When you're assigning people to an engagement team, that's one of the things that you need to look at. The prior practical experience of the engagement team members on engagements of similar nature and complexity. So one of the things the scheduler will do, or people who are assigning the individuals to the engagement team, is to check the experience of the people, right? So for example, if I've been able to work in technology industry, and there's an availability with a client who's in the technology industry, I could easily move into that. Because if I worked on Microsoft, I can probably work on Apple. If I've worked on Microsoft, I can probably work on Tesla. If I've worked on MTN, I can work on Vodafone. That's the idea. So that's something that is, we need to keep in mind when we are assigning individuals to